So I've always loved the way some guitarists are able to create these kind of smooth flowing chromatic lines in their improvisations. And I don't know whether you've ever tried to do this yourself, but if all you do is just play the chromatic scale, you find that very quickly you drift away from the key that you're playing in. And that's really the secret to this, is how do you play chromatic lines but stay locked to the key that you're playing in. Now there are a few different ways of doing this, and I've talked about a couple of different ways in the past as well in other videos. But there's quite a useful way of doing this based around the pentatonic scale, and this has sort of some innate structural characteristics to it, which makes it really quite a useful trick to be able to do. So I've created a PDF to go with this as well. Feel free to download that, and that's got all of the positions worked out going up the neck as well. But let's start by looking at the structure of these scales. So let's start with the standard pentatonic scale up on the 12th fret. You should know that shape, hopefully. Okay. Now if we give every one of those notes a leading note, in other words, if we play the note with semitone below, we end up with a pentatonic scale shape that's, you know, 1 fret down. And if we play both of those together, we end up with this kind of a shape. And that's pretty much how you create this kind of chromatic pentatonic scale shape. So it's a scale with 10 notes in an octave rather than 12, but it's only two notes are missing, but that allows us to do some really kind of interesting and unique things with it. Okay, so that's how you build the 10-note scale. Let's have a bit of a closer look at each one of those notes and just see if we can figure out the function of them. So let's zoom in again. If we start with our pentatonic scale then, and start introducing a few of these other notes, hopefully you'll start to see that you actually are using some of these already. So for example, if I had the second and the major sixth there, I come up with the Dorian mode. Or if I'm playing using sort of the major pentatonic, it becomes the Lydian mode. Let's add another one, which is just there, which is a flat 5. Hopefully you know how to use that as well, especially if you use a Dorian mode in a sort of a blues context. You should know how to use that as well. So that's 3 out of the 5 extra notes come straight out of the sort of the Dorian blues type sound. Let's add another one, which is this major third. And again, it falls out of that kind of that Dorian, you know, if you play around with the sort of the ambiguous minor major third sound, then you kind of already know how to use that major third. And then the final note is the raised 7th, the major 7th. Now, so hopefully you can see this scale fits really quite well, is really quite consonant over that kind of Dorian blues sound. But we're going to use it in a slightly different way anyway, so you shouldn't restrict yourself to just using it in these kinds of situations. You can use it all over the place, because we're using a concept of strong notes and weaker notes, or passing notes, when we actually start to use it. So we'll be using these notes in a slightly different way than you would maybe if you were just playing sort of a Dorian blues type sound. Okay, so it's worth thinking about what makes a line fit over a particular harmony. And it's all about how you're putting strong notes over that backing track, how you're fitting these sort of consonant notes, notes that fit against the harmony, and where you put them in relation to the backing track as well. And generally, if you can put strong sort of consonant notes against the backing track so they fall on downbeats, so they fall on strong notes rhythmically, or you can sustain them, or you hold them, or you emphasize them, then those lines are going to fit. And equally, you can play pretty much any other note as well. And as long as that note is used as a passing note, is used as a note that you're using to go from a particular note to a note as well, so you're just passing through it. As long as it's used in that kind of context, you can play pretty much anything and it will sound like it fits. So let's look at these scales again from the point of view of strong notes and weak notes. Okay, so let's start with our pentatonic scale. So these are our strong notes, if you like. These are the notes that are most consonant to the key that you're playing in. These are the notes that fit. And if you do any playing with a pentatonic scale at all, you know how to make these notes work over lines that you're playing. So these are the notes that you want to target. These are the notes you want to land on strong beats, and these are the notes that you want to dwell on. Now, if you have a look at every pentatonic position, you can see that there's a pair of these chromatic scales that sits around that position. So in this position, there's my pentatonic scale, and then just below it, I've got that chromatic type scale, and just above it, got that position as well. So because I know my pentatonic, I can think of those two scales in the context of that pentatonic shape, and that immediately gives me some clue about how to target the notes. The other thing that's really nice is these scales have a really quite a consistent structure to them. So every string has exactly 4 notes on it. And depending on whether you're using the first or the second scale, you can see the first note on the string and the third note on the string are strong notes, and the other notes are weak notes. And in the other position, it's the second and the fourth that are the strong notes. Okay? But again, this kind of consistency across the scales and across the strings gives us something that we can really lock into. Now there's another really neat thing about these kinds of scales as well. Because every other note is a strong note, it means that when you're playing 16th note lines, if you start on a strong note, you find that strong notes keep falling on strong downbeats as well. So if I start with a strong note on a downbeat, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4. There's a strong note, strong note, strong note. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So on a strong note, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Can you see how that all the strong notes are lining up on the strong downbeats? And the other nice thing is it doesn't matter where you take your line, as long as you're playing up and down the scale, strong notes always line up with the strong downbeat. So for example, and you can do this experiment yourself. As long as you're going up and down the scale and you start on a strong beat and you start with a strong note on a strong beat, you'll find that all of the strong notes, all of the pentatonic notes fall on downbeats, which means that the scale instantly lines itself up irrespective of where you take your line, which is really quite nice as well. Okay, so what I'd suggest you do next is to find a backing track. Find something that you can play over comfortably. Find something with a sort of a constant 16th note pulse as well, rather than triplets when you first start to play with this. And then pick one of those scale shapes, doesn't matter which one it is really, and just start to explore it. Take it for a walk over that backing track and see how the strong notes all line up, irrespective of where you can take the scale line. And this is really the easiest way of sort of familiarising yourself with this scale. It's really worth doing it in the context of a harmony as well, because otherwise you can get lost. There are so many notes here, but you really want to have an awareness of where the strong notes are, where the weak notes are, and how they line up with the backing track that you're playing against. So that's really what I'd suggest you do next. Anyway, The PDF is attached, as I say, so download that, and that's got all 10 positions worked out in the context of the pentatonic scale. And we'll chat next time anyway. Goodbye.